Okay, we're still learning to talk the talk of wine, and this talk actually is going to get a little abstract, a little ideological about wine, but that's okay. Because sometimes you need to step back and look at the bigger picture, even as a novice, even as an intro into wine, so that you understand the bigger picture of what types of wines are produced in different places and what does all this lingo mean. Again, we're talking the talk of wine. And it really is kind of complicated as hell to the novice. And it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people get scared and don't get into wine at all. Because there's so many words and so many terms that you get daunted. It's like a foreign language. You're like, ooh, I don't know that language, so I'm out. I'm not even going to try it. Hang on, though. We've already started down this path. One of the complicating features of wine is that there's a whole bunch of words that we actually recognize and know, but we don't understand the context in which they're being used. For instance, awesome, lovely bottle of Amarone, described as, this Amarone delivers savory notes of cured meat, smoked bacon, barbecued herbs, and candied berries. The intensity and overall complexity is impressive. And so is the richness and persistency of the mouthfeel. What? Herbs? Candied what? Mouthfeel? Now, again, these are all words that we understand. You know what candied and berried and barbecue mean, but they're put into this formula that we're like, oh, that's a little scary. But that's what we started to do last class, was actually pull out the wine wheel and start using everyday terms to start describing the aromas and flavors of wine. Hopefully you're already doing that and will continue to do it on your journey into wine. It ain't that hard. It's whatever you think it tastes like, whatever you think it smells like. Write that stuff down, use the wine wheel to help. But here's the thing. There's actually a whole bunch of other words, and a lot of them, that you have no clue what they even are. So barbecue you get, but Burgundy, maybe you don't. Burgundy, what's that? That's a color, right? Or about Bordeaux? Or Chianti Classical Reserve, or Rioja. These are all words that you're like, what? Or perhaps even Cabernet Franc versus Cabernet Sauvignon versus Sauvignon Blanc. Is this an Alsace wine or an Albarino? I don't know any of these terms. What does all this stuff mean? Here's the deal. Most of those terms that are very complicating on wine labels and in wine descriptions and in wine stores is that the words that you don't recognize are either grapes or they're places. They're actual wine regions. And depending upon the bottle and where it's from, they will label the wine by the region it's from or by the grape that's in the bottle. And actually, this gets at the heart of wine production altogether. There is certain traditions and certain new experimentation in wine that has brought up this kind of dichotomy. Do people label for the region or do they label by the grape? Let's start talking about some of this stuff in kind of an old world versus new world phenomena that will help you get what's in the bottle. Because depending on where it's from, it might be telling you what grape's in there, even if it's from a region, but it's certainly probably also giving you hints to its style, whether it's from the classic old world of Europe or from, say, California or Australia. There are hints of style, what to expect, and why they craft these wines in certain ways. Let's start with the old. And this time I think we will start going straight to some bottles. You start looking at bottles from the old world, and by old world we're talking about Europe, obviously. Old world wine producing countries like the core, France and Italy, but also Spain, Portugal, Germany. These are places that by and large label the wine by where it's from. So classic example, here's a wine from Burgundy. Now I know what's in this bottle because I'm a wine drinker. I'm a hardcore wine drinker. So I'm familiar with this, I'm seasoned with it. This is 100% Pinot Noir, which is a grape. But you, the unseasoned veteran, might not know that. You're like, what's all these words? Well, Beaune is actually a geographic word. It's a region within northern Burgundy. So simply by seeing that word, I'm like, oh, I know what's in this bottle, but they're not telling you, the consumer. And another great one is also from Burgundy, Pouilly-Fuissé, a smaller sub-region, a place. And simply naming the place, it's actually a village. Simply naming this village on the bottle to the French, they know what this means. This is 100% Chardonnay. In fact, if you see white wine from Burgundy that's probably 100% Chardonnay. If you see a red wine, it's 100% Pinot Noir. But they don't tell you that because they don't want to tell you that, because they don't have to tell you that, because it's not about Chardonnay or Pinot Noir. It's about the place that it's from, that it's expressing a certain style, that they make it a certain way. For example, staying in the old world, here's a Chateauneuf de Pape. The biggest word on the label, actually, I guess the biggest one is the winery, but then next after that is Chateauneuf de Pape, the region that it's from. Has a whole bunch of different types of grapes in there, put together in a certain formula, a certain recipe to make a certain wine that's expressive of this region. And one that you probably have seen reference to, one of the more expensive wines from the old world, Barolo, from northwestern Italy, a very small region that makes very expensive wines, made out of one exact grape called Nebbiolo. But they're not telling you that anywhere on the label. It's not about that. It's about Barolo. Because there's other regions in northwest Italy, like Barbaresco, who also make Nebbiolo, but they do it slightly different. So they're expressing that this is the wine that we make from this particular place. Maybe another one I should have pulled up here is a Chianti. Everybody understands Chianti, Chianti Classico, Chianti Classico Reserva. Those are all wines that we recognize as distinctly Italian, but you don't really know what grape's in there, do you? And the folks from Chianti would say, and it doesn't matter, okay? So what does it mean? Why do the old world countries label by region? It has everything to do with their history and why they make wine, or why they have made wine over the centuries and millennia. And what I'm talking about here is that grapes themselves, and when I say grapes, I mean the actual grape variety names. Things like Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Malbec. All of these things are actual grape names. But again, the Europeans, they grow all these grapes, but they don't focus on them on their product labeling. And part of the reason is that those grapes are the European grape from which all other grapes come from. Vitis vinifera, is actually not even from Europe. It's from Georgia, modern-day Georgia and Armenia. But it moved around the classic Middle East and through Egypt, then Crete, then Greece, and then over to Italy, and then exploded and moved all around the rest of the European world. And they've had a few thousand years to experiment with planting those grapes in certain areas, tweaking them a little bit, separating out genetically, and we have this Pinot Chardonnay that we'll call Chardonnay, and a Pinot Noir, and a Pinot Meunier. All these grapes are related, but they, over time, evolved out slightly different aromas and slightly different flavors, and they grow them in certain or different places, and over time, certain regions specialized in growing certain grapes. Back to our Chianti example, Chianti is mostly Sangiovese. You don't see Sangiovese from anywhere else in Europe because that's a Tuscan thing. It's the grape that they, over time, have decided this grows really special here. It expresses itself in a very unique way. And over time, Europeans have had a tendency to also pair their wines with their local foods. And in fact, the cuisine of any particular little village or town or region of Europe expresses its localness. What local foods do they grow? And how do they prepare those local foods? And do they grow this type of vegetable and maybe raise wild boar? And then how do we express that onto a plate? Wine is looked at in these European regions as food itself. So they would say, okay, we do a wild boar dish here in Tuscany, and we grow Sangiovese, and so we're going to craft this Sangiovese from Chianti in a certain way so that, because it is food, it pairs with our local cuisine, because we have wine with our lunch and with our dinner, that it all kind of melds together. And that's why when you go to Europe, it's such a delight to go to every single small town and village and try what they do locally. Everything's a local expression, including the wine. So what wine producers in Chianti or Bordeaux or Rioja, they're trying to express the place. Here is this grape. Yes, we grow this particular grape here, but it's not about the grape. It's about Chianti. It's about expressing the region. And in that sense, they're going to typically blend. So it's mostly Sangiovese and Chianti, but they're also going to put in a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of the other to make the best wine they can for that particular year, based on kind of a common theme of what Chianti is. This is this year's Chianti, and it goes so wonderfully with all the dishes of central Tuscany. See how that works? That's the old world. In that context, it makes no sense for them to say, this is Sangiovese, this is Sangiovese. No, it's not Sangiovese. Other places may grow Sangiovese. This is Chianti. This is what we do. This is us. Does that make sense? That's the old world, old school, traditional way. Let's zoom to the new world. Because The New World, of course, and we're referencing now all other places, not Europe. So other wine producing regions are now the New World wine producers, and these are places like, obviously, America, California being king, but also Argentina, Chile, Australia, South Africa, and quite frankly, any other place on the planet outside of Europe now that's producing wines. Okay, so what's the difference? Before I get to the story, let's look at some of the bottles. What do you see is the distinct difference here? So now we're seeing a Pinot Noir. You know what? Let's even do a Chardonnay. I think I had a Chardonnay here. Here we go. I showed you a Pinot Noir and a Chardonnay from Burgundy that did not have the name of the grape anywhere on the label. Again, because they don't care. They're expressing Burgundy, not a Pinot Noir. And here's a Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from the New World. And the word Pinot Noir is front and center, big as day. And they're saying, yeah, it's from a certain region. It's actually from Oregon. And here's the name of the vineyard, but it's Pinot Noir. You know what's in the bottle. It's Pinot Noir. Even a funnier one is this one here from California. Chardonnay is written down here real nice, but the biggest word on the label is actually Josh. I don't know who Josh is, but he thinks a lot of himself because he's named the whole wine Josh. It's Josh Chardonnay. So what we see already from the get-go is, hey, they tell you what grape is in there, and then the next important thing is actually not even the geography, not where it's from, not a region, but maybe the winemaker, the producer, who's trying to show you or tell you, well, this is my product from my winery, and here's the grape that's in it. The region I'm from is actually of not great consequence, or not as great. A couple of other ones from, let's see, Cloudy Bay, New Zealand. Sauvignon Blanc, you may or may not know the Cloudy Bay label. You may or may not know anything about New Zealand, but they're telling you this is Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough. Yeah, from Marlborough, whatever. It's Sauvignon Blanc. So if you've ever had a Sauvignon Blanc from anywhere else on planet Earth, we're telling you, you should know what to expect from this. It's a Sauvignon Blanc. That's the great name of the grape. I love this one, perhaps is my favorite. Zinfandel, California's premier gigantic grape. And it's the biggest word on this label. In your face, this is Zinfandel. It's a grape that we've made into this varietal wine. And really, any New World wine, you'll be hard-pressed at this point to not find any New World wine that doesn't have the name of the grape somewhere on it. So this is, never heard of it, Lot 96. California, again, that's just a big state. They're not that concerned with geography. Petite Syrah is the most important thing to look at. You really are not going to run into too many American, South American, Australian wines that don't feature the name of the grape pretty darn prominently. Now, why is that? Now we can back up and talk about the story of the New World. What's going on with these guys? Why do they label by the grape and not by the region? Because they don't have the history, man. The New World is new. They're the ones that got colonized by the Brits and the Frenchies and the Germans and the Italians. And those Europeans, when they went out and took over the rest of the world, took their love of wine and actually the grapes themselves with them to plant in all these other places. How do you think, Australia is known for Shiraz? It's not native. That's the Syrah grape that was brought from France. Every New World wine, I should say every, most 99.9% of New World wine are European grapes. So they came from Europe, brought by Europeans who were trying to replicate the diet, lifestyle, food, cuisine of the native lands and would plant these things. But the deal is that the New World doesn't have those thousands of years of historical evolution to back them up. They haven't experimented as much or as long. So people just plant everything all over the place and like, well, let's see what does good here. Let's try Sangiovese in Michigan. Let's try Chardonnay in central India. And people are doing that all over the place, but they don't have the history. So when producers and then subsequently consumers in the New World are understanding wines, they look at all these things and they're like, I don't know these names. Chateauneuf de Pape, what the heck is that? I don't know what that is. But if you tell them, oh, this is Merlot. Merlot? Everybody knows what Merlot is. That's the grape. And you can have Merlot from California or Bordeaux or from Morocco or Australia. And it will all have a central common theme. You know what that grape tastes like. It will express itself differently in different places, but it'll have a major core that you will be able to identify. Same is true with the Sauvignon Blanc, I said. Sauvignon Blanc in France and Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand is wildly different in taste and aroma. Wildly. but you will recognize the base core of it. Ah, that's Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc's the only grape that makes this kind of grassy herbal flavor that's distinct no matter where you get it from. So in the New World, we've always looked upon alcohol or wine as something you drink to get drunk, as something that you consume to have fun, as a libation, not necessarily as a food, and not necessarily something that pairs with a food, although that's changing and we're getting there. So we, New Worlders, develop wines that are ready to drink now, that taste good on their own, that you're not that worried about if it matches with the certain local cuisine, because we don't have local cuisine in Central Virginia or Napa Valley. What does that even mean, cuisine of Napa Valley? I mean, I think they grow and produce everything there, and there's infusion of taste from around the world. And the same is true with Napa Valley wine. It doesn't mean anything to say Napa Valley wine. It's only telling you where it's from, but Napa Valley grows everything. So it's not as expressive. Therefore, we have to tell the consumer what's in here. Oh, it's Petite Sirah. You don't know this place. The place is not telling you anything. The Petite Sirah is what's telling you what's in the bottle. You should know what to expect from a Petite Sirah. And then, okay, I like that flavor profile of Merlot or Pinot Noir. I like that grape, so I'll try it from California or Michigan or Florida or Australia. That's why we label it that way. And these are wines that are usually fruity or floral, that also the winemaker influences heavily, because they can put in things like malolactic fermentation, which gives it an oaky, buttery, vanilla flavor, and we're like, ooh, that's good. In fact, the whole idea of the oaky, buttery Chardonnay, that's a California thing. They evolved that. And what is it expressing to you? It's saying, hey, it doesn't really matter this is from California. It's the style. This Chardonnay, you know what a Chardonnay is, got it, but we're gonna make it fruit forward and kind of big, but also the winemaker's gonna manipulate it. So it's going to be oaky, buttery over the top. Yes, I'm accentuating this style in my winery. And where is it? And Josh is saying, this is my Chardonnay. Yeah, Chardonnay, but it's from here, it's from me. Not necessarily the region, that's of no great consequence. So in summary, looking at these kind of differences between Old World and New World, I do want you to understand, this is all blurring in today's world, because people are experimenting all over the place. People in Europe are starting to experiment with new grapes and different varieties, and they're not following tradition, because they're like, hey, we want to produce a big oaky buttery Chardonnay, because everybody likes it, so we want to do it too. And so they're doing that there, but also in the New World, people are saying, hey, actually, I like traditional kind of old school Bordeaux's that pair well with food. And you can do that too. So it's better to actually not refer to French wines as Old World and American wines as New World. Dig this. Write this down in your brain. It's all about the style now. Is it Old World style or New World style? That makes sense? Because you can be a Californian doing Old World style and a Frenchman in Languedoc doing New World style, and that is happening all over the place. Dig. Old World style now refers to wines that can be aged, many more of them can be aged, that may not be awesome to drink by themselves, and certainly not when young, that may not be good to drink by themselves ever, that actually pair better with foods, and because they're crafted in that particular way, they actually can be spicy or earthy, that when you then pair them with foods, the underlying fruit and complexity will come out in different layers. That's Old World style, and people are doing that all over the place, okay? But this is where it's from. Again, it used to be expressing the region and pairing with the local cuisine. Anymore, it's like, no, you can do that anywhere. If you have that style, though, more food-friendly, if not food-demanding wines, yeah, that's Old World style. New World style, drinkable right now. We can do this right now. Fruity forward, doesn't necessarily need food, might be manipulated heavily by the winemaker, so it's not expressive of a place, it's expressive of the grape, and maybe expressive of the winemaker himself. That's the big difference between New World style, Old World style, but it's all getting mixed up all over the place. And again, the world is changing fast. Zoom into just a couple more here. Because the Europeans have been losing market share, because more and more people in the New World are drinking more wines than they are in the Old World, they are changing the laws and changing their styles and changing their experimentation in Europe. Great example here. Burgundy now with the word Chardonnay right on it. They're saying, oh crap, people from America don't know what Burgundy is, but they know what Chardonnay is, so let's put that on the bottle. And even this wonderful Touraine, I love this Touraine, love Touraine, but that's a region. It's a region you've never heard of. I never heard of it until I bumped into this particular wine. But Touraine saying, hey, look, we know nobody in America knows what the hell Touraine is. They know what Sauvignon Blanc is, so let's put that on the label right there, big as day. This is happening a lot more experimentation from both worlds. And I want to end with this. Again, don't be daunted when you see labels, European labels that you're like, I have no idea what Chateauneuf du Pape is. That's cool. And don't be daunted, actually, when you see labels that have some bizarre grape name that you never heard of. That's what your local wine reps are for. That's what your wine store is for. Ask them questions, because I want you to be buying the wines that you like. Do you like Merlot? That's cool. Ask the local wine store, hey, what old world style Merlots do you have here? What European regions make Merlot? I want to try some outside of my comfort zone. Ask them what the words mean on these labels. Just ask them. People love talking about wine. To be like, I don't know what's in here. Only through experience and time and writing down stuff will you start to get a sense of, oh, if it's from Burgundy, it's Pinot Noir. Oh, Bordeaux does mostly Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. Oh, Rioja does Tempranillo. Okay. I know what Tempranillo is, but I didn't know what Rioja was. So you start writing these names down and talking the talk and reading more about it, you'll start to build that vocabulary, which is otherwise impossible to know from the get-go walking in. It's impossible. And let me end with this. I've been drinking for a couple decades. Well, more than that, but I've been drinking wine for a couple decades. And any of the people in the store will tell you too. They've been drinking wine for 3 or 4 decades. Still, even though we're pretty fluent in the lingo, what we're seeing in today's wine world is an explosion of experimentation everywhere. So different styles from different places, and that's awesome. But we're also seeing a whole new regions we've never heard of before pop up out of Europe, because things are so much more available in a globalized economy. So still, even though we've been doing this for 20 or 30 years, people be like, oh, this the Chinon region from Central Loire, I ain't never heard of that. That still happens to a lot of us. Okay, well, what is it then? Well, let's figure out what it is. The same thing's happening with grapes, because there's so much more competition and people want new flavors and new styles and new stuff. People are growing grapes that you've never heard of all over the place. I love the Greek wines. If you ever see a Greek wine, don't be scared. It'll be like a word that starts with an X and has 27 syllables and 1 vowel. And it's a great name. I've never heard of that grape. But again, that's the fun of it. Try it. Don't be daunted by not knowing the words. Ask the local people or look it up on the web. That's what's great about it. Lots more grapes, names popping up, a lot more unknown, herefore unknown regions popping up, and stylistically experimentation happening all over the planet. But at least now you know, I hope, old world style and what that connotates versus new world style and what that connotates as well, and go out there and try more and more stuff. But now let's turn to actually looking at the components of the wine that we'll describe that are consistent among all wines, things like body and sweetness or dryness levels and things like that. And that's next.